Greek nouns, the third declension. We'll be continuing our lecture by talking about vowel stems. As we recall, the third declension comes in three major varieties. The consonant stems, which we've already taken a look at, the vowel stems, which we'll look at today, and the highly irregular but worth memorizing, for which I didn't have a better name, which we'll look at in the next video. The standard endings are still socia, esoncias, with the normal changes in the nominative and accusative for the neuter. So keep that in mind. That's your life raft if ever the third declension seems too confusing. And as always, the dictionary entry is extremely important. What's strange about these words is that they're called vowel stems, but sometimes the vowel stem that you see doesn't make sense with the name. A good example is polis. The class of these kinds of nouns are called iota stems, and yet the stem for the vast majority of the time, as we can see in the genitive singular, will be an epsilon. So what happened to alphabet algebra? What happens when all these vowels hit each other? Well, nothing actually, because we need to talk a little bit about how Attic Greek handles vowel sounds. One thing to remember is maybe this verb looks familiar. It's often the first verb that people will see in textbooks as an example of a vowel stem verb. Notice that none of these vowels contract, none of them interact in any way other than sitting right next to each other. So Greek is very comfortable with diphthongs sitting next to long vowels, diphthongs sitting next to other diphthongs, to short vowels, as they are here in the plural. What Greek is not okay with is a plethora of short vowels sitting next to each other. And that's generally when we're going to see contraction or elision of different kinds. So, because these are vowel stems, we won't necessarily see short vowels hanging out together, but we might see it, and that's just the exception to the rule. So let's take a look at a standardized stem. In polis, for example, we have here the os of socia lengthens so that we have a short vowel sitting next to a long vowel, which Attic Greek is much more comfortable with. The iota part of the stem exists in the nominative, accusative, and vocative, but it's really an epsilon everywhere else. Eos, ei, esin, eis, eon, and eis. Other than that, it's fairly straightforward, as long as we realize that the standard iota stem doesn't really have iota as its standard. The vast majority of those iota stems are abstractions. They're abstract nouns. The polis itself was considered an abstract noun because it was really the citizen body. And the polis was both physical and metaphysical. It was a group of people gathered together. It was all those who had died that came before. And it was the physical buildings and interactions and economy that was needed to run a polis. The vast majority of abstract nouns in Indo-European languages are feminine. There are some notable masculines and one notable neuter. Presbus, presbeos is ambassador or old man. And mantis manteos is a soothsayer. The single notable neuter is actually a physical noun. Astu asteos is what the Athenians at least would use to refer to the actual town of Athens, as opposed to just the region or maybe the polis, which was all of Attica, technically, because if you were a male citizen owning land in Attica, you had Athenian citizenship after certain democratic reforms. Whereas aisto astu, if they were going into the town, you were really going into Athens proper and maybe even up the Acropolis or into the Agora to do business. So let's take a look at the last few stems that are strange. The first is the diphthong stem. The most common diphthong is the eu diphthong, so basileus. And you see the same thing where Attic Greek is very comfortable putting long vowels right next to short vowels. And it does it here and here. And yet, I don't think that alpha is long. I've got to look that up. But you have two seemingly short vowels that you would expect to contract here and here into an eta or something else, but epsilon plus alpha is usually eta or long alpha. But they don't, so strange. And the most common omicron upsilon stem, there's really only one, is boos. And this is just strange. It starts to defy a lot of the rules where you're going to have short vowels right next to each other, but both get pronounced and they never seem to contract. Boos and boos, not really sure what the difference was there, or why this didn't contract into this, which you would expect. So boos is irregular, and even more irregular than boos is nous. Take a look at nous, and you can see that we're all over the map. We start with a diphthong, then we go with a short vowel followed by a long vowel, then we lengthen the epsilon to an eta and have a short iota. Then we go back to the ow stem. We go back to lengthening the eta, come back to a short epsilon and an omega, go back to the ow, end with the ow, and then in the vocative we just have the strangeness. In general, in the vocative, actually, in the third declension, you are safe dropping the sigma and guessing that that's a vocative. But if you really need to know for whatever reason, it's probably better to look it up. All right, that gives us the entire third declension vowel stems, or at least the ones we need to know.